So this is the first episode of I'm calling it Christina and Kate right now, but I had this idea that we could call it something that rhymes. Don't wait with Christina and Kate or life's great with Christina and Kate. I don't know, something like that. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to come up with some ideas, but what do you think we should call it?
I don't know. I started thinking of really silly things that instead of rhyming with Kate, rhyme with Christina. Like let's eat pastina with Kate and Christina. But that actually is not what this is about. So I'm just being silly and I can't think of anything right now.
I think that's all allowed. Well, I'm just so excited. I'm just so excited to be doing this with you because it was just so thrilling when I was reading your Substack and you said that when you were younger, you wanted to be a talk show host too. I was like, nah. And
Hmm.
then, like, when we were talking yesterday, I was like, we should do this together because all the best talk shows have at least two hosts. You know, what
Yeah.
talk show has just one host? Well, Oprah, but she always had like some other person on there, right?
Yeah.
And there's like the tabloid talk show that has only one host, but the shows that I grew up listening to always had more than one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also feel like what happens sometimes, at least with the ones that I like to listen to, I won't listen if I don't like the guest. And I'm more likely to listen to the ones where it's just the host or the hosts speaking,
Yeah.
So I'll skip over the ones where I don't like the guest. And yeah, so I agree with you. But funny enough, the show that like made me want to be a talk show host, which is so random thinking about it now, was Tyra Banks had a talk show. And I
Uh-huh.
thought
I
she was
remember.
so cool, but it was like so like millennial core when you think about it, because it was like, I don't know, I was still in high school. It was probably like '07 or '06 or whatever that she was doing it. And I loved that show and she made me want to be like a talk show host. I was like, I want to do this. I just want to talk to people. I wasn't good at school. Like I mean, you and I are like night and day when it comes to how our performance was in school. But I was like, I don't know, I'm just like good at talking to people. So I want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember in high school thinking that I wanted to be a talk show host, but I feel like I had already lost it at that point because I had gotten involved in the church already. And the church
Mm,
stripped everything like good and holy for me for a while there when I was like trying to be somebody I wasn't, to make some
mhm.
invisible authority in the sky that was outside of me happy with me so I would be accepted in front of him when I died. Absurd.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
was my life at that point, and making sure I was doing all the right things, and of course pleasing my parents, making I was getting good grades because I thought that's like my job. My job was to like make these people that raised me or gave birth to me. And I did for the most part until I didn't. And then it was like pandemonium. Like that was the hardest part when I had my breakdown in 2018 after my divorce and was just falling apart. I was just falling apart because I think I had spent so much time trying to be somebody I wasn't. I made my parents unhappy, and my mom had never been more angry with me. She didn't know what was going on. So, of course, like in her stress
Mhm.
moment, she blamed me for what I was doing to her. And my sister did the same thing, and that was difficult. And I have a lot of understanding and compassion for it now. But then I was
Mhm.
like, what are you like, you're just mad because I'm not being who you want me to be right now. Like
Mhm.
I'm not being the perfect happy child that you thought you had, when a lot of that was just me trying to keep them happy so I could
Yeah.
avoid the wrath, right? Because both my parents had wrath that I saw them not take out violently against my sister. They didn't, it was like not physically violent, but man, my dad could yell, my mom could yell, cold shoulder, that sort of thing. I thought about telling my mom I was starting a talk show with my friend, but I don't think I'm gonna tell her now. I think she's still a little like sensitive about when I talk about my growing up because
Yeah.
she's like, I did the best I can, right? But if you follow a lot of these TikTok influencers and Instagram influencers that are, and like psychologists that are talking about childhood trauma and stuff, they say, that's a very common reaction to parents when you want to talk about how things were. And I just want to talk about the past version of my mom. I don't want to talk about the current version of my mom. But I think a lot of people have a hard time detaching themselves from who they were in the past.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. I feel like both of us, we did things differently, but both of us have this good sibling thing that kind of held us back. And when you
Yeah.
think about it, it probably would have been better for both of us to like rip the Band-Aid off sooner. So even though I wasn't a good student, that also wasn't pushed so much in my house. Like, my mom would get annoyed that I wasn't a good student because she came to this country from Italy when she was 5 and, like, learned how to speak English and just naturally loved school. Like, she gravitated towards school. Books were an escape for her. Like, she would get in trouble for reading while family was hanging out, you know? We were just very different naturally, and she didn't understand why naturally I couldn't just be good at school, and she was a single mom, and, like, she couldn't understand why, like, other kids would come home and their parents would have to sit down and maybe do the homework with them. And I would just lie and tell my grandparents that I did my homework when I didn't. Like, I made it through school because I was just, like, a nice kid. I was a respectful kid. I was smart. I understood what was going on. I just didn't do my homework. And also, like, I'm so against homework. I don't like, if I have children, they're probably gonna be homeschooled because I don't believe in teaching kids that they should, like, work all day from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. So that's a whole other thing. But I wasn't very good in school, but she also didn't push it very much. For us, it was more of like this, it was about being well behaved, you know? So I had these dreams of wanting to do things a little bit differently, but then it was like society would always kind of come back with, no, you're doing it wrong. So I did what I wanted to, you know, like I went to makeup school. I ended up dropping out of college. Then I still became like a corporate slave anyway, because I worked for a big company and I did things right. And even though what I really wanted to do was maybe like be on YouTube and do tutorials and like I wanted to just be out there. I've always wanted to be out there. And instead I like censored myself. And I think that both of us growing up with siblings who were always like the problem child's getting in trouble, we didn't want to, we were like, no, I can't be that person too. Right? We had to be the good kids. We had to be the good girls. And yet now I look back at, you know, with my sister and I'm like, good for you that you were a little rebellious. And also like somebody probably should have been getting to the root cause of like why you were being so problematic. Like I feel for her because it was obviously because of like what was going on in our childhood with our dad and stuff. But it's like now when I talk about things in the past, it's the same reaction. So I think it's very normal. And you have to feel for them, right? Because nobody has like a manual for how to be a parent, you
Right.
know? It's the most important job in the world. And yet it's like the barrier to entry is like, as long as you're fertile, you know, you have a kid, like there's no license, there's no degree, there's nobody teaching you really how to do it. So I feel for my mom, but I know that like when my sister and I even say things jokingly, she'll get so defensive and so upset. And
Yeah,
I
me
get
too.
it. Yeah.
She gets so upset. She gets very upset. She's just and then she'll tell me that I live in the past. When back in the day, I wanted to go to counseling with her because she also had a reaction to my breakdown that she took very personally. And I was like, "Well, let's go to counseling." And she's like, "No, you don't need you're the one who needs to go to counseling. I've already moved on from the past." And I'm like, "Well, if you can't talk about it, you haven't moved on from it. And if you're still acting and treating me as if I'm someone that you knew in the past, then you're the one stuck in the past. Like, I want to go to this so we can move forward and help us both let go of these versions of ourselves that we no longer are." But so there's so much letting go that has to happen when you try to have a relationship with somebody who doesn't want a relationship with you or doesn't or thinks you're somebody else, you know? That's just like a state of mind, like the energy zone. My sister gets stuck in fighter mode a lot where everybody's kind of out to get her, and that's when you start looking for things to get mad about and causing scenes and like becoming the victim when you were just meaning to be playful, for example, and it's not something that I used to get bent out of shape about it. Like, I should have a relationship with my sister. I need to repair this, thinking that it was my fault, you know, because like nothing I did mattered, you know. She had like made up her mind about me, the static being from when we were, I don't know, 15 or something. And I did an MDMA therapy session when I was living in Amsterdam. And the thing that came up was my sister. And I reached out to her and I was like, I want to talk about some stuff. And she's just like, well, you were the reason that I was so angry when we were growing up. And I'm like, okay, there. I didn't know what I know now about like the fighter energy where you blame somebody else for how you feel and not asking, you know, why do I feel this way? What feelings am I having? how am I getting triggered right now? We didn't have any of that vocabulary. We didn't get taught any of that
Mhm.
stuff. It was like we weren't going to therapy because that would mean something was wrong with, the perfect Roll twins. Our last name was Roll before I changed it and got married and other foolish childhood things. I
Mm.
was seriously a child when I got married though. So you were smart. You waited until you were in your 30s to get so smart. Smart. It's like nobody tells you that your brain isn't fully developed and you just think you know who you are. But I look back and I'm like, I remember how I felt. I remember the feelings that I had. I remember how I felt when I was in a room full of people and how unsure of myself I was, how non-introspective I was. I just kind of felt empty inside. Like I was just carrying around this empty shell. I didn't feel like a real person. And I would hold my breath a lot, just being in places, just this anxiety in my body that I didn't know how to explain. I didn't know why it was like that. So I would just try harder. I would try harder to fit in. I would try harder to be a better Christian because most of the circles I was in at the time was like a Christian circle.
Hmm.
And it weighs on you when you're trying to be somebody you're not. It makes total sense that you have a breakdown when you get
Yeah.
divorced, because like I was so
Mhm.
relieved I don't have to be somebody I'm not person anymore. I don't have to be somebody I'm not. I don't have to make his parents happy. I don't have to put on a smile when I really want to put on a frown. I don't have to force myself to have sex with him anymore. Although that had stopped. That had stopped month before he said he wanted a divorce. I told my ex-husband I didn't want to have sex with him anymore because he was sleeping with somebody else. We were both seeing
Mhm.
other. He was in a
Right, right.
relationship.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and he had told me that we couldn't have sex without a condom anymore, which is fine with me because, like, it burned. Like, I think it was just a reaction. Like,
Yeah.
wasn't supposed to be that guy, and there was just like reactions, and I wouldn't understand that. I didn't understand that for a long time, but because I was on birth control when we got married and stuff, and I thought I was attracted to him when I wasn't, and
Hmm.
thought there was something wrong with me when I stopped taking the pill and I didn't want to have sex with him anymore. I'm like, my libido is gone. I have to take all these herbs to like fix it. I've come a long way in understanding what's happening with the body and how these chemicals and hormones and synthetic things can affect it. But I told him, I think it was like we were in a hotel room at an event and that was the last time. That was in August. And I was like, I just don't feel attracted to you anymore. It's great that you have Carly. I want you to be happy. I really didn't think we were ever going to divorce because we were best friends. We were best
Mhm.
friends. We were the person that we spent the most time with, that we could tell anything to for the most part, except I was so unaware of the stuff that I was not even telling myself. I was like, I would have thoughts of like, how the heck am I going to spend the rest of my life with this guy? How am I going to
Ugh.
spend the rest of my life having sex only with this guy when I don't feel anything when I'm with him? And I
Yeah.
found him gross. Not that he is a gross person. He's not a bad
No,
looking guy
no.
himself, but I didn't like the way he smelled. Like all his pheromones are off, right?
Mhm.
That's what the birth control pill does. It turns off your pheromones or like morphs them, so you're attracted to somebody that you wouldn't normally be attracted to. It doesn't mean it happens to everybody. I mean, there's people who didn't get on birth control until after they were attracted, and then maybe they were more attracted. And you just don't know what it
Yeah.
can do to your hormones. So
Yeah.
I just can't believe that. Like I'm a completely different person than I was a year ago. I was thinking about that yesterday and I was thinking about how I felt when I first got in the van and how I felt at campgrounds. And it's almost a year. It'll be a year and like a couple of weeks that I've had my van already.
Oh,
And I just
right.
can't believe it. I can't believe it. But things have changed so much. And yeah, I'm just excited to be here with you and talking about all of it because I think everything's on the table.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny as you're talking and we're talking about parents, what I notice, and I could be wrong about this, but my perception of how both of us are maybe different when it comes to speaking our truth is even though maybe there's certain ways that I grew up, my mom was always very, for lack of a better word, liberal, but like, I mean, like traditional liberal, like everybody should be able to be free and like do whatever they want and whatever. Like my mom was
Libertarian,
always very,
all
yeah, like
that.
my mom was always very just like open minded and understanding. And like, even if she didn't agree with something, or even if there was a certain belief that she kind of gave us, it's more of like she got it from somebody else and it was just a watered down version. But, either way, it wasn't like anything harsh. She was always very supportive. Even if she was displeased with something, she didn't make me feel terrible about it. So when I say things to my mom now, even if she's not happy, I feel comfortable enough to do it. And like I'll have uncomfortable conversations. And sometimes it takes me a little too long. But where I struggle more is publicly. And I think that's where you and I are different. Like, to me, I think once in a while, you just, like, don't think it's worth it with your family a lot of the time to have the conversation, or you'll avoid it, or maybe even avoid them sometimes altogether if you
Yeah.
feel like you
Right.
have to. But you will post things online that will result in a lot of hate, possibly being banned or having a video removed or being shadow banned. And not that my views are, like, so out there or so extreme, or not that I feel that even the need to voice so many things, but I notice that I've watered things down, and I have this gift and curse of being so diplomatic that I'm, like, afraid to say the things I wanna say sometimes. I'm so afraid of being canceled. I'm so worried about repercussions of not, like, speaking out about things that are going on in the world because I just genuinely don't have the head to do it sometimes. Like, where do you think that comes from for you, where there's, like, this disconnect of, like, with family, it's hard, but publicly, it's easy, like, you're willing to burn at the stake, and I'm, like, the complete opposite.
I don't know. That's a good question because I used to be the exact opposite too. Like I would not say anything unless I read it 14 times. And I'm still coming out of that. Like I wrote my first Substack, which publishes Monday at the time of this recording anyway. I was more in the mode of I'm just gonna say what I think and I know what to keep to myself. There's certain things I think everybody will secrets that people will keep for themselves. Everybody should have that because you should be your own
Mhm.
best friend and the most trustworthy confidant that you can just be 100% yourself with yourself. Like all the nitty gritty details, if you don't change your clothes for 2 days, if you don't want to, that's just that you can be with yourself and not judge yourself and not have any fear of but you're never going to know what other people are going to think about you. And it's really none of your business, right? That saying, what other people think about you is none of your business. And I have to remember that a lot of times, but it's also, I think, on a subconscious, semi-conscious level, I think about my intention. My intention is and there's a balance because I feel like there's a proverb that says the wise man knows when to keep his mouth shut. So there's a lot of things I don't say, a lot of things I don't say, specifically with regard to, the cartel that we have to pay or else in this country. I even posted a 3 or 4 minute video about that and TikTok let me post it, but then after like an hour or two, it still said 0 views. So it felt like that video got shadow banned. So I was like, well, maybe that's just the universe saying like it's not time yet, or this is one of those things where the wise man knows when to keep his mouth shut and you just do your thing and stay under the radar and tell the people that are closest to you off the airwaves about, this rabbit hole that you found, this like, I guess, ideology or alternative reality that is different from the one that's been propagandized, if that's the way you pronounce it, to all of us since the day we were born. Like, you're born in this country, and as a result, you're now the property of this government, and every penny you make is going to be taxed, or else.
Mhm.
How is that not us on a fucking farm? Like, how are we not on a tax farm? How are we not indentured servants? How are we not property? Especially if we choose to move out of the country, we're still property of this country with our passports and our citizenship, which is just like marketing, right? Branding. It's another word for slave. To
Yeah.
be a citizen in this country. Because if you move out and you go live someplace else, if you go earn money and you're on the airwaves somewhere else earning money, then you owe money to your home country because that's the one that owns you. There are ways to opt out of the system. The first time you fill out your 1040, that's when you're opting in and you're giving up your Fifth Amendment rights. The ones that, I plead the fifth, you're giving those up when you sign your tax forms. So if you just like don't fill that out for the first time or put them on notice that you're rescinding that election, because it is an elective system, it's not a compulsory system the way they make it out to be. But if you sign that 1040, you're agreeing to be part of that. You're like, I agree that this is a system, I would participate in it, but they prey on our ignorance, they prey on our vulnerability of not knowing or unawareness. And so that's why I'm so huge on awareness now, because you don't know what you don't know, like you saw in
Mhm.
my slide presentation. So
Yeah.
those of you listening to this, Kristina and I work together. I've been working on summer projects for selftransformation.com. She's helping me with my social media because she's just a creator queen and just has a brain that I don't. And I think we just make a great team like that. So I have this slide in a presentation that I'm working on where it's just 3 bubbles, and there's 1 big bubble and 2 smaller bubbles. And the smaller bubble inside is the things that you know, you know. And then there's another smaller, somewhat bigger bubble, but still smaller than the big bubble that they're both in, that says things you know you don't know. And then everything else on the outside of those 2 bubbles, I call them the awareness bubble, is the things you don't know you don't know. And if you've ever
Mhm.
said to yourself, I didn't know that was a thing, right? People used to say that to me with Proofread Anywhere all the time. I didn't know
Yeah.
proofreading was a thing, you know? That's your awareness bubble increasing. So things from the vast outside, the unknown, can be pulled into your awareness bubble, and your awareness bubble can expand. And that's pretty awesome. I think that's pretty awesome because your world is they say you are a universe. So you can continue to expand, and that feels good. It's in human nature to want to expand. And so when we hear things from parents, teachers, friends, or whatever that want to keep us in the bucket, you know, because we're all crabs in a bucket, right? And we want to get out and have a better life, but the crabs that are with us are like, no, but this is gonna happen, you know, that it's greedy to want more, it's selfish to want more. And I say it's normal to want more. And it's not about
Mhm.
greed, right? I'm not talking about greed like wanting more money, right? It's wanting more freedom, it's wanting more awareness, it's wanting to feel more expansive, to wanting to feel our best, to wanting to have more experiences, to grow as a human, to want
Mhm.
more growth, divinely human. And it is, yeah, when people say that wanting more just arbitrarily without knowing what that means, that's ignorance right there. It's just saying, oh, that's greedy. Well, who told you that? Who told you it's greedy to want to expand as a human, to want to grow and evolve as a human and to become better? Who told you that was wrong? Where'd you get that, you know?
Yeah. It's, I think that once you get to a point where you realize that there's so much that you don't know, it actually makes you feel more empowered than thinking you know everything.
Yeah.
It's like, it's so weird. Like, knowing that you know nothing makes you feel better because there's always more possibilities.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it
Everything.
allows you to let go
Mhm.
and allows you to trust, and like lately, I've been having this thing where I'm like questioning all of the goals that I had and all the things that I wanted. And it's because for a long time I thought that the only way for me to be successful and have freedom was to go after certain, career opportunities or business opportunities. But when you let go and you're like, "No, I know the type of life that I want to live and how I want to feel, and, like, whatever opportunities are available for that will find their way to me if I allow them to." It feels so much better. And then also, it brings up this thing of, like, people want things, and I'm putting quotes on that, "want things," and they don't actually want them. And I think that you can probably attest to this as somebody who's now living in a van. Like, you could be, living in a really big property and, like, driving a fucking G-Wagon and, like, doing all of this stuff, right? Because that's what you're supposed to want as a successful person. And I think a lot of people just look at these markers of success and this, like, overconsumption, these things they're supposed to want. And I don't think people know what they want, and that's why that for me, I think that that's why I, like, couldn't find the success that I was after for so long, is because I thought I was supposed to want a really big house, and I was supposed to want a really fancy car, and I was supposed to want insert whatever, thing here, right? And meanwhile, I think that the things I really want are much simpler. Maybe not even so simple. Like, I know that I want to do a lot more travel, but I don't necessarily need to stay in a five-star hotel when I travel. I just, like, want to be able to go and see the things that I want to see, right? So we're told what to want, and then we're told how to get the thing that we want, and neither one of those things are aligned. And yeah, I think about like human design, like you were talking about how you used to have to like heavily research something before being comfortable enough to speak on it, which is very aligned with your human design. Not to confuse anybody, but like in your human design, you are like a investigator, you're a researcher. You're meant to go down that rabbit hole. But where people get stuck sometimes who have that same trait is that they will never feel like they know enough. And for you, a big part of just like growing up and something that you seem to have to remind yourself of often is that you know enough, right? Like you're always going to desire more info, but like you understand that you don't always need more, so you don't have to hold yourself back. Yeah. So,
Yeah, it's certainly a work in progress. I think kind of piggybacking on what we talked about earlier, coming out of our shell and saying the things and being brave enough, because I think there's a lot of people who have an online platform that are not brave enough to say, I don't have the answers. But I mean, one thing I learned from coaching school is that you don't have the answers for your clients. You don't have the answers for anybody but yourself. And I think that's what's valuable about bona fide coaching, not the toxic coaching that are very familiar with. I'm a coach and I'll just tell you what to do. Coaches don't tell you what to do. Good coaches do not. They ask you questions. Doesn't mean they can't teach you anything, right? I teach in the
mhm,
transformer. But good coaches will ask you questions that maybe you haven't asked yourself and get underneath the things that you're saying, ask questions about the things you're saying to just help you sort through your own inner wisdom and to remind you that you have the inner wisdom, because so many people have been taught by marketing, and it's marketing is what it is, and marketing that you don't have the answers. The answers exist outside of you. And for me, that started when that really became apparent that that was the world that we live in is ruled by marketing. We are in this corporatocracy. The world we're living in is ruled by marketing. The answers are outside of you. It's in this product, it's in this pill, it's in this physician, it's in this doctor, it's in this test, it's in this mineral, it's in this drug or whatever. It's in this person, it's in finding love, it's in having more money, it's all outside of you. But yeah, as a person who lives in a van now, it's not. All of it's within
mhm,
you. All of it's within you. God is within you. So that's why I left religion. Major, major exodus from Christianity, because it teaches you, even though the Bible says and Jesus himself says that the kingdom is within you, you have to ask God in Christianity to come into your heart. You have to invite him. And like
mhm,
there's no separation. That's Satan's, if you believe in Satan or the dark side or evil or whatever, if you believe in that, that's the biggest lie, is that you were ever separate to begin with from God, from the wisdom that's within you. That wisdom, that intuition within you, that's God. That's not saying that you are God, that I am God, but we're all connected to God because God is everything. So God is all. God is good. So how can we be bad if we are made by good? And if like doesn't like all of the stuff that we do that's bad is out of ignorance. So if you
mhm,
just don't know any better, and people who commit murders, right? They think they're doing the right thing in some way, shape, or form. They think they're doing something good for themselves. It's totally misguided. It's totally ignorant. But that's where they're coming from, And there's science that's coming out now. I learned about it from Dr. Daniel Amen, actually, who founded one of the clinics that I went to get my brain scan when I was falling apart at the seams. And things that can get in your brain, like toxic heavy metals, certain things can impede the function of your brain, can prevent certain thoughts, like makes you think crooked and just not normal, not healthy, I guess. It's probably a better word than normal, because there's a lot of things that are normal that aren't healthy.
mhm.
And that can cause people to become serial killers. That can cause people to have narcissistic personality disorder, all the different other personality disorders, bipolar, ADHD, all has to do with where these heavy metals are placed in the brain, which since they enter through the bloodstream, they can get lodged in the brain at any time, right? Because the blood is trying to feed all of that tissue and the metals can't get out. They can get out, but not with the traditional therapy that we're given when we go to a psychiatrist, right? So I learned by my life breaking down, learning about this world of psychiatry and the multi-billion-dollar marketing budgets that pharmaceutical companies have to convince us by advertising on television, where the US is one of 2 countries in the entire planet that pharmaceutical companies are allowed to market directly to consumers on TV. So when I realized that, and it's a multi-billion-dollar, billions and billions of dollars every year to market disorders directly to consumers to convince them that the way they feel is because of something that their drugs, their synthetic drugs, can fix. So organic bodies take this tiny blue pill full of aluminum, the artificial colors and other chemicals that suppress the symptoms, alter the function of your brain. We're not going to look at your brain. We don't know really how this works. We just know that the symptoms go away. But what they don't tell you in those commercials, I mean, they do, but they say it really fast and it's in fine print along the bottom of the screen, is all the side effects and all the illness that these side effects are fucking illness. They're illness. So you're going to take these pills because that's your only option, right? And just because something isn't science, this is the crazy part. This is the thing that really gets under my skin is that so many people have been brainwashed to believe, and I wouldn't know this had I not gone through it. So many people have been brainwashed to believe that because science hasn't discovered or uncovered, official science, I should say, because I think they actually know what's causing it. Just because there's no cure for bipolar disorder, ADHD, whatever, fill in the blank, OCD, that means that there isn't one and there never will be one. So the only option is to take these pills and go to therapy, right?
Yeah.
Just because they don't know doesn't mean it's not there. So there's so much power in saying you don't know. Doctors, most of the time, they're not trained to tell you, I don't know. They're not trained to say that. They are trained to look authoritative and, ask your doctor. And so I was telling you yesterday about wanting to do this documentary about bipolar disorder and the truth behind it, but not get the majority of that information about it from doctors. Of course, I'm going to consult doctors, but not the mainstream ones, not the ones who are paid by the pharmaceutical companies. That part I'm going to be exposing. But you can learn more about bipolar disorder by talking to the people who have it. And of course, from the people who recovered from it, like me, than the people who have never had it and have only been trained to prescribe pills to treat it, right? And I put treat in quotation marks because treating is like, that's marketing too, even the word antidepressant or mood stabilizer, all of that is marketing to convince you that, no, of course I don't want to, I'm depressed, I should get an antidepressant. It's just logical, right? It's just playing on stuff that most people are not aware of, that their brain works. They're responding to this bullshit, and so the more you can learn about propaganda, and there's like a BBC documentary about the history of propaganda and like this guy who informed a lot of it. I can't remember his name right now, but it's fascinating to learn how propaganda is used even today to convince people that to follow instead of lead, to look outward instead of inward. And yeah, it drives me bonkers. It keeps me awake sometimes at night, but all I can do is continue saying the things and sharing the stories and providing the logic. And it turns out I enjoy that. And it's normal for my human design too.
Yeah. Oh my God, so many things. I feel like I had like 50 different fireworks going off on my brain as you're speaking. So one of them is, I joke lately, especially because now it's like 4 years have passed. It's another election year. It's another year that they're like, things are going to get crazy or whatever. And I think about how like, I went from being like very like liberal, more left to like really becoming a conspiracy theorist, to finding myself like so in the middle and being like, you're all fucking crazy. One of the best things I think though that you can do for yourself is become a crazy conspiracy theorist for a very short period of time. Because if there's only one thing that you can take away from it, is that you will never take information at face value again. And you will always dissect the information that's given to you. So exactly like you were saying, where if they say there are no studies to suggest fill in the blank, people think they've done the studies and none of them suggest fill in the blank, when all it means is we have not studied this from the angle in which you're implying it should be studied.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you ever want to go down a rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, take it with a grain of salt at the very least, it's fun to consider these things. Some of them might make you go, I don't know, I believe in that. But at the very least, it helps you to start taking in information very differently. And that's been, I think, really good for me because now when they say, oh, there's no studies that show this, right? I'm like, oh, okay, they haven't done a study to like see if this is really the thing. So that's first of all. Second of all, I would really be dying to know if any studies or correlations have been shown between women who get breast implants and increase in depression meds, because a lot of people are now getting explant surgery talking about breast implant illness. And I've noticed in people that I know behavioral differences once they've gotten breast implants. So I'm like really dying to know that. I've never looked into it if any studies have been done, but I would love to see like a chart showing like women getting breast implants and women being on depression medication. And then lastly, I don't know if we've ever spoken about this or if it's something that you've already spoken about. I want to know how you feel about the TikTokification of self-diagnosed ADHD that's happening right now,
Oh
because it
man.
seems, and autism, because I don't ever want to be insensitive, and like I don't know how it feels to think maybe that you have any of these things or whatever, but it seems like it's very normalized and you're a bad person if you say that somebody can't self-diagnose these things, or I don't know. Like I don't know how I feel about it. I go back and forth about it. Like you tell me what you think, because it seems more up your alley.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I fell down the rabbit hole of self-diagnosed ADHD when I didn't know what I didn't know. This is back in 2021. I was on Reddit and there was ADHD women, ADHD subreddits. And so I was reading these. I posted like all my symptoms, which were neurological in nature, related to the other issues. And when I took care of the root cause of those issues, those symptoms went away. But what I noticed is that people in those communities are very attached to that identity, and they believe that finding out, "Oh, I have this disorder." It's just like finding out you have bipolar disorder is so enlightening for some people because they're like, "Okay, well, at least now I have an answer." But it's not an answer. It's not. And in the medical medium texts, of which I am a scholar and will be a lifelong scholar, ADHD is linked, just like autism, to presence of metals in the brain. And it just depends on where those metals are. Usually it's the midline of the brain for autism, and those can end up there at any time. They can be there from birth because metals pass through the bloodstream, and they can be in the eggs, in the sperm with which we're conceived, through which we're conceived. And so that's how those metals end up being genetic, right? When it's actually hereditary, and there's two different things. But it's interesting because I used to follow a lot of those influencers on TikTok talking about ADHD in women and late diagnosis and helping people get diagnosed. And then I get targeted for ads a lot for get on meds for ADHD. And it's just, drug dealing essentially is what it is. And I was also on Adderall for a while. My psychiatrist at Amen Clinics actually prescribed it for me. And it helped. It helped in some ways get out of the funk, but ultimately I ended up like destroying all of them because I had hundreds of pills left from getting my prescription and then not getting it and just not using it. And the last time I took Adderall, I got like a just huge headache. And there's toxic ingredients in it too. There's blue number one or whatever color blue it is. There's metals. There's, obviously or amphetamines.
I was going to say, it's also meth.
It's like also basically meth. Yeah. And it's going to be, it creates adrenaline from your adrenal glands and it depletes your body. So you get short-term effects. So you can help yourself in the short term, but in the long term, it's going to I used to say I have a friend, but the former CEO of my company, he's like a year younger than me. And I've blocked him since February because he's extremely toxic and manipulative and mean and just like not a good guy. He has had completely gray hair for like a really long time, and he's younger than me. And my hair is going gray, but it's related to stress. And if you're constantly taking, 80 milligrams of Vyvanse, or I think 70 milligrams is how much he was on, or if you're constantly pumping yourself full of Adderall every day to go, go, go and get things done so you can be normal, not looking underneath it and seeing that there's something below that, the surface of that label, ADHD, then you're kind of still in the dark, right? Because those labels, they're not real answers. And
Mhm.
Anthony, the medical medium texts, talk about that a lot. You get these answers from medical professionals that are just labels. They're just band-aids. And that's what these drugs are. They're band-aids for a problem that can be addressed. And nobody really talks about what my diet's like or what your diet's like in these ADHD forums. And some people do. And I've thought about, I mean, that's one thing that I think the wise man knows when to keep his mouth shut. Like, I don't want to go in and stir up the pot and go in these forums and reply to my original post and say, like, all these people were welcoming me to the ADHD community. Congratulations on figuring out what's going on and all these things. Like, it's like cheering you on for having this label, and it's like people like to belong, right? So it's just their human nature to want to belong to a community. But ultimately, it's not really an answer. And if you're not addressing the underlying causes for this thing and you're just treating ADHD or bipolar or whatever it is as this phenomenon that you can't do anything about, then you become a victim of it.
Mhm.
And so these communities and these influencers are promoting coping. They're promoting coping, and that's very popular because so many people are they live in the victim world. They might not even realize it, right? They're
Mhm.
just like, this is how it is. It could be rationalizer energy, a lot of fighter energy, but they live in that reality and they don't believe, because they believe that that's reality. They don't believe that anything outside of that reality exists. So their awareness bubble is very small in that way. It could be very large in other places, but in the ADHD realm and the mental illness realm, oftentimes very, very small. And that was me before I got diagnosed so many times and got pulled into the system to see what it was all about and understand it. So your awareness bubble is so small. And if you're in this community of people who believe that they're stuck this way and they're just looking for tools and ways to cope, that's still victimhood. That's still victimhood. It's fighter and victimhood. Because if the finding ways to cope is like fighting back, right? Fighting back against this disease, this mystery illness, this genetic abnormality. Your brain is wired differently. There's no proof of that. If the brain is wired differently, it could absolutely be what I already talked about and will mention again, the metals in your brain, because your brain is an electric grid. And so if there's metals in certain parts of your brain that affect your executive functioning, and you're getting stressed and that brain lights up and those metals start to heat up and it starts to fire off like signals and that electrical grid that you wouldn't normally have if those metals weren't there, it's going to cause symptoms. It just makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I'm not part of those communities anymore. Every now and then I see somebody who pops up and says, yeah, so I'm autistic, and like that's your whole brand and it's all about
Mhm.
identity, right? So if you
Yeah.
want, and more power to you, if you want to identify as autistic and you want to talk about it, that's who you are, is autistic. But I encourage everybody, and it's why I teach what I teach in the transform retreats too, the identity incubator classes. It's like you can be whoever you want to be and you're choosing that. So if you're choosing to identify with autism, ADHD, bipolar, making it part of your identity, they've got you.
Mhm.
There's a whole industry emerging for ADHD. Those drug companies are like, yeah, and there was a huge shortage of Adderall, Vyvanse, all these stimulant drugs. There's a shortage of them because so many people think they need them now.
Yeah.
And nobody's deficient in amphetamine salts. Nobody's deficient in mood stabilizing drugs. Nobody's deficient in antidepressants or anything like that. And there was a big study that came out in July of 2022 that proves that depression is not caused by low serotonin at all. Completely debunks all that, but they're still parroting that because that's what they
Mhm.
were told, like in the 70s or 80s, by the drug companies, that this is what we think is causing it. If you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's happening is these communities are so convicted of their situation, of their diagnosis, of their
Yeah.
victimhood, right? Totally
Right.
sucks. I hate this disease. This is the worst disease ever. And it's just like, if you want to focus on that, you're just going to notice more of its effects. But
Yeah.
if you want to focus on, okay, looking outside of what you think you know and being open, having that intention of solution oriented, solution focused instead of problem focused, the whole world opens up. And so,
Mm.
yeah, back to those awareness bubbles of when you know you don't know much, then you know that there's answers out there, because that's the thing with science, especially science, medicine, the answers are out there, but just because science hasn't found it yet doesn't mean they don't exist. That's how I
Right.
feel at medical medium. People are like, oh, well, he's a quack. Like the guy that ran my company, that was a big thing that got me to block him, because he was just like insistent that Anthony William, the medical medium, was a quack because he's not recognized by the American Medical Association. Duh. Like, duh, he's not recognized because
Yeah.
he calls everything that they say into question, and he tells the truth about what they're doing to us. And that's so powerful. And he would refuse to read the book. And I was like, I can't, your energy sucks. Like, I can't be
Yeah.
around it. And telling me I was scamming people, and by telling them about medical medium and being on the side of a quack and all this crap. And it's like, I don't need that
Yeah.
energy in my life. But people will, when they feel defensive, because he's the kind of guy who thinks he knows everything, people feel defensive about stuff. Then they start calling you names, and they start saying, well, oh, you're just
Mhm.
like following a quack, and like, you're so dumb to like think it's real. Never mind, I've healed from this information.
Right.
He's seen it happen, but he's blind, right? People who think they know everything, they think they know who you are. And I think people with narcissistic tendencies, and that's definitely who this guy is, will think of you as a static thing. So
Yeah.
he still saw me as the version of myself that I was when I signed away my power to him in my business. So he still sees me as this dumb girl who hasn't like grown at all since
Mhm.
I've allowed him to take control. And it became more and more apparent, and that's why I ended up blocking him. Like, you have not changed, and you haven't even
Right.
noticed that I've changed. It's because you
Yeah.
haven't changed. You think I'm just like you, and so I'm like, I can't. He's getting
Mhm.
married, actually.
Yeah, whatever. I
Yeah,
feel bad for her, but it's
I do
funny
too.
because
I'm
that
totally
kinda, like, comes back full circle. I think that when you're in a position that's unfavorable, it makes other people around you feel better and feel more comfortable
mhm.
sometimes. So then you rising up, it's that crabs in a bucket. Again, you rising up and you getting better makes them question themselves, and they don't like that. They're more comfortable when you're not in a good position. So
Yeah,
that
it makes
that's
so
what I have to say about that. But like when it comes to the ADHD stuff, I've never felt or questioned that I had ADHD. That's never been my experience. So like I can't talk to it personally. I've never felt like maybe I might be autistic. So I can't relate to that. But I'm curious, and I just wonder if some of the things with ADHD are not even for some people, yeah, like maybe they have these symptoms because there's something going on in their brain and they're deficient in something or whatever. Maybe it's heavy metals. But for some people, I think ADHD symptoms are symptoms of stress and symptoms of what's going on in their world. And then they're like, no, there's something wrong in my brain. And it's like, I think that what's going on around you in your world and what you're going through and like trauma or whatever it is that's built up can cause you to have these symptoms. There's
yeah,
that. And then also when it comes to autism, a lot of people are diagnosing themselves or other people, by the way, with autism. However, maybe what we're told is not normal or autistic traits are actually just normal for that person. And we should just be more like accommodating of these people and not label them with something different from the rest of us. Like
um, yeah, crabs in
maybe
one
maybe there's
bucket,
just different
right now.
ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it's literally, it sounds like like there's a bucket of crabs over here that's comparing themselves to another bucket of crabs over here, and then there's a crab out here on the floor, and he got out, so he's crazy.
Hmm.
And people like to label each other. And that was actually something I wrote about in the my first Substack post, about how people have been brainwashed to believe that psychiatry and this industry of mental health that has popped up so heavily over the last several decades is fact, when it's all
Hmm.
theory. It is all
Yeah.
theory, and it's one way of seeing people's reactions to toxic environments, both environmental, emotional, physical, toxic environments. It is reactive behavior, and it's one way of seeing it. And there's no way to put all of our human behavior, and psychiatry has tried it. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. They have tried it by trying to index all these things and trying to say, well, if you fit into this bucket, you're this, and that bucket, you're this. And, it's a lifelong illness. There's no cure, but we don't know what causes it. Like, none of it makes any sense if you look at it from that lens, because it's all just theory. So there is a cure. You don't know what the fuck it is. Just say that. We don't know what the cure
Yeah.
is, and nobody's looking for it because they're making so much fucking money on pills. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think people like to label other people to make themselves feel better. They like to label themselves to make themselves feel better because it makes you feel normal. And while it's become very common to have mental illness, and that's the other thing is like, it's so common to have mental illness. There's more people who have mental illness and chronic illness and illness period than ever before. Yet we think science is more advanced than ever before, but
Mhm.
it's not. I mean,
Right.
why? It doesn't make sense. Like there's a Converse, I think it's Converse, right? Where the more the medical industry supposedly knows, the more people get sick. Like
Mhm.
it's correlated. Is it caused by it? You
Right,
know,
right.
I think so. I think so. More people are getting
Yeah.
sick than ever because of the industries that are involved in getting us sick and keeping us sick. Food, pharmaceuticals, all of it. All of it.
Yeah.
It's all We live in a toxic environment, and it makes me want to leave the States. Like when I'm done with van life, I I'm seriously considering leaving the States at some point, one of these
Yeah.
days. I don't know. I bought land in Georgia, but it doesn't mean I have to live on it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that too, I do think about that as well. Like, head towards probably a wrap up. I wanna know because the way that you feel about psych meds is the way that I feel slash am so triggered by people being on Ozempic. Like, it triggers me so much, like, makes me angry, jealous, pissed off, sometimes judgy, like all of the things I feel when I see people losing so much weight on Ozempic, and I've been struggling so much with my weight my whole life. Yeah, like, have you like, do you even think about Ozempic? What comes up?
yes, I do. Yes, I do. I clicked on an ad and I don't qualify because I don't have enough weight to lose, I guess. But I've gained 30 pounds in 3 years. A lot of that I think has just been issues coming to the surface to help me deal with it easier. Like it's so much easier, like when you gain weight over 3 years, to be like, oh, well, that was not hard. Like, let's see, it's not hard to gain 10 pounds a year. It's really not. Like,
Mm-mm.
if you're consistently not being mindful about how much you're eating, if you're binging when you smoke pot, because I have been on and off, like, I would like smoke pot for a week and then stop for a couple of months and smoke for pot for a week and stop for a whole couple months. And like even that, even if you just binge eat for a week, a couple times a year, it could still add up to like 10
You
pounds over
can gain
time.
10 pounds on a cruise.
Yeah, you can gain 10 pounds on a cruise. Exactly. So, and and as like we get older, they say your metabolism slows down or whatever, but I've been doing a lot of detoxing. The liver has been working hard, and in the medical medium text, it's very clear that the liver is involved in weight loss, which is why like toxic. I think the keto diet, high protein, high fat, is extremely toxic because though it works in the short term by depleting your muscles of glycogen, by kind of starving your brain of glycogen and forcing your body to turn fat into glycogen, it's creates adrenaline in the body that makes you think it's working, makes you think you're feeling good, but it's all just an illusion. And eventually it tires out your liver and you gain all the weight back. I've done high carb or high protein, high fat in like high school. Like I actually read your Substack this morning in bed because I was so encouraged by our phone call yesterday where you like start your morning reading Substack. And I really love it so far. It's more than I had pictured in my brain. And now they have like the notes and stuff. And I think I really want to like participate, and like
Yeah.
we're going to podcast up there, and I'm going to put it out on the other channels and stuff too. I think this is the direction I want to go with Self Transformation Radio anyway, and just put it out on the airwaves. But yeah, I also feel those feelings of seeing how people have lost so much weight and they're on semaglutide or Ozempic or Wegovy or whatever. And I've heard about the risks, and I'm like, okay, short-term gains for long-term what? Like, what are you setting yourself up for long term? And are you taking care of the root cause for why you gained the weight in the beginning? Because even though you might be eating intuitively, if you're still not losing weight, if you're in a calorie deficit and you're still not losing weight, it's an indicator that there's something physical underneath there. And it's most likely the liver, because a lot of these people have probably been on the involved in the high protein, high fat fad. It's a fad, and it taxes the liver. It taxes the liver, and the liver is involved in processing fat. It's involved in processing and filtering everything. And when it's full of crap, it's full of stuff. It starts storing it. It starts storing it because it needs to. Same thing with toxins. Toxins are stored in the fat. And so if you are taking in a lot of toxins over time, and that's why we end up gaining weight as we get older oftentimes, is because we have stored a lot of this over time, and then the liver slowly becomes more stagnant and more sluggish. So it starts like hoarding out these toxins into the fat cells. It stores in the fat cells. It's safer there. It's just store it in the fat cells. And then when you start to lose weight a healthy way, it happens slowly. It happens slowly. So I did buy a scale for the van. I used it this morning. I'm in the 170s. I'm 171.2 pounds according to the scale this morning. I've never weighed that much in my life. And I'm officially like overweight according to the scale, but I'm so much happier than I was when I was super skinny. And there's so much value to be, well, I feel better when I shed some of this weight. Yeah. And I'm working on it. I'm doing it now. I'm releasing what no longer serves me, but I'm doing it in a healthy way and getting to the core of my habits and being more mindful and not starving myself, not punishing myself, and noticing when I look in the mirror and say, ugh, like, or if I like am driving and I'm like poking my belly, like it's rolled over my pants or whatever, and like feeling the feeling. Because I used to be so scared of being fat to the point where that's like all I cared about was like how I looked in my jeans. And I would just feel so self-conscious constantly, even when I was wearing a size 2, right? I felt so
I
self-conscious.
haven't been a size 2 since I was 4 years old. That was never a thing.
Well, I mean, I was probably like a 2-4. It depends on what clothing size I bought. But I was like so slim, but I wasn't as slim as so-and-so. And so are they looking at me? But I didn't realize at that time, this was probably like 15 years ago, that I was feeling this way, or 10 years ago, that I was looking at myself or assuming that everybody else was as conscious of their weight and my weight as I was. I was like, oh, well, so-and-so is so super thin and she seems to be so effortlessly, and she probably looks at me and thinks, oh, like she's got some weight to lose. And part of that has to do with growing up in diet culture, growing up listening to my mom and grandma comment on people's weight, and hearing my grandmother yell at somebody, not out the window, although she might as well have. She was very feisty, I guess is the word that comes to mind, kind of lady, badass, walking down the street. Her windows were up, maybe down, but so it made me very conscious of how I looked, and I didn't want other people to yell fat ass down the street as I'm walking down the street. And maybe I'm waddling a bit more than usual, but it doesn't matter what other people think of me. It doesn't matter. And if I feel great, and if I'm feeling healthy, and I'm taking better care of myself, and I'm free, I'm in a low stress state of mind now, it's only a matter of time before my body is like, exhale, right? Because when you exhale, you just let all the stuff go. Eventually, that's also going to mean, especially if I keep treating myself right, which is the intention. It's about setting the intention of treating yourself like your own best lover, like your own best friend. It doesn't mean treating yourself to decadent dinners, but you're also like the grown-up and the inner child, and you're parenting yourself. You have all these inner relationships with yourself. And I think about Botox and fillers now the same way as I think about Ozempic. It's like, it's so tempting because you see people getting results, and it's like, well, I don't have to stay on it forever. I could just get on it, and I could probably find some doctor to prescribe it for me, so I can just lose it really quick and be done with it. But then I haven't addressed the reason why I gained the weight to begin with. I haven't. So, and that's the same thing. I don't want to say it's the same thing with Botox and fillers, but like, why I want to look at my face as I get older, and I'm already starting to do it. And when I see my smile lines, like, I love them. I'm like, wow, this is the experience of life. I'm getting older. I still feel like I did in many ways. Like, my inner child is still there. I still feel young. And as I see this vessel that I'm in aging, that's exciting to me. Like, wow, I'm progressing through this phase that I'm in, because death is just a doorway. It's not like I'm getting to the end of life, period. That's just social construct. It's a human construct that death is the end, right? It's just the beginning of the next phase of life. And this body is just my vessel. And I used to. I think this is the driving force behind my fear of getting fat. I used to identify with my body. I was very identified egoically with my body. I am my body. And I remember the first I was working out when I think I was listening to somebody say, like, "You aren't your body. You're in a body. You aren't fat. Your body has fat," you know? And it's an identity thing of what does it
Mhm.
mean about me if I have extra weight? Like, am I lazy? Am I, you know, whatever fill in the blank adjective that you might tell yourself. Am I a slob? Am I unscrupulous? Whatever you might want to describe yourself as because you have this extra weight. There's a story behind it. There's a story behind it. And we can have compassion on ourselves and ask ourselves why, why I have this extra weight, why I want to lose it or why I want to release it. I think I want to change my language around that too and stop saying I want to lose the weight. I want to release what's not serving me anymore. And yeah, and focus on feeling good in a healthy way, not a hedonistic way of like, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna smoke and drink and laze around because that's what feels good in the moment. We wanna think about like, I've been trying to focus on if I feel maybe sleepy in the afternoon, I stop and take a walk, or if I stop and sleep at a Planet Fitness parking lot, I go in and I walk on the treadmill while I watch an episode on my show instead of just laying in
Mhm.
bed and watching it, you know? Just things that are gonna make me feel good, and ultimately, I feel like Ozempic, I would always know that I didn't do it authentically, and I didn't do it and people will say, "Oh, well, you know, overweight and obesity is a disease," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's a disease, but that doesn't mean a drug is the thing that you need to rectify and bring that back your disease into ease."
Yeah.
It just means an imbalance, so you gotta find the
Yeah.
imbalance. The drug's not gonna help the balance, it's not.
Right. Right. I'm also
Yeah.
you know what it is for me? I'm seeing people who are already not overweight really, or like maybe on the BMI, like ancient BMI scale, they would be considered overweight, but they're not. Like you look at them and they're not overweight. Those are the ones I'm mostly seeing on Ozempic, which is crazy to me. Like, I guess in a way I can almost understand if somebody is like life threateningly big and like it would the long-term risks would almost it would almost be worth risking because their weight is like really scary. I guess I can understand it. That's fine. For me, my thing is I would have to if I went on it, I would end up being on it forever because there's a reason why I'm not losing weight. And for most people, it's not because, like, at least for the people that I see or I know, they're not going on it because they're like doing keto and like, but no, it's because they are just not restricting or eliminating anything. They just can't stick to any sort of plan. Same thing for me, right? And like I have, when I think about it, overall, overarching, I have a very healthy lifestyle. Typically drink enough water. I know you're not into caffeine, but I have 1 cup of coffee earlier on in the day. It doesn't make me feel any type of way. I go to yoga, depending on the week, between 3 and 6 times a week. I try to walk. I sleep a lot, but I overeat. Like I overeat. I am pretty good during the week and then the weekends come and it's whatever. If my husband is away and I'm feeling like anxious, I'll overeat, right? I know that I have to figure out the overeating and very slowly I'm figuring that out. And same thing as you. I mean, like I put on a really like a substantial amount of weight when COVID started because I wasn't working retail anymore, standing on my feet for 9 hours a day. And we didn't know what the world was gonna be and whatever, so, like, my body was probably protecting me from something and whatever, but I know I would have to be on it forever. I know that it would suck so much to go on it and then get off and then put it all back, and I also don't wanna be losing muscle mass, and that's what's happening, right? People are just rapidly losing muscle mass because you just don't want to eat. You have no desire to eat. It just, like, shuts that off in your brain. And I already was on birth control for 13 years, and it's been hell coming off of it. I finally have a normal cycle, you know? And I'm like, I would be a hypocrite if I then decided to go on something that made me disconnect from my body again. But I get so jealous and so upset when I see other people losing the weight that I want to lose, and then I feel so like so much shame, and I'm like, oh, if I could just get it together and figure it out, whatever. But at this point, I'm just gonna allow it to be as like slow and reflective and just be in awareness of what I'm doing as much as possible because I can't. And also, my mom had pancreatitis once. It was like after she had gallbladder surgery. She had gallstones removed like 20 years ago. Afterwards, she had some complications. She said pancreatitis, which is a possibility when you're on Ozempic. She said it was so much worse than child's labor. She said it was
Yeah.
the most excruciating thing to go through.
Yeah. So when you 30 years from now and you're reflecting back on today, this time of your life where you have chosen to have compassion on yourself with where you are and your so-called weight loss journey, it's a self-love journey ultimately, and it's a mindfulness journey, and it's a acceptance journey, and it's a loving yourself journey, not in a health, not necessarily in like, I feel like the healthy at every size thing where they're saying that obesity is normal and obesity
Right.
is healthy is not good. But when you look back on yourself, you can feel so proud of yourself for saying no to that dependency because you're right. Like if you don't take care of the root cause of why you put on the weight, then you're going to have to stay on it forever. And that's where they want you. They want you to be a repeat customer. And the drugs market themselves because people are like, can't help but show off their results or whatever. But where are they going to be in 30 years? What effects is that having on their
Mhm.
body that they don't see right now? What's underneath the surface? That has nothing to do with how they look. It has nothing to do with
Mhm.
how they look, and thyroid stuff, pancreas stuff, like, that's serious stuff, and if you're putting your body in any state of imbalance, it's going to cause problems. You might not know what they are, and if it happens 30 years from now, 20 years, 10 years, who knows? We can't know, I think Kelly Clarkson was talking about how she had lost weight, and she didn't mention exactly which drug, but it's one of those GLP-1s, I guess, is what they call them, and she was not I think she said something about how she needed the drug even though she had had thyroid issues or it ran in her family and have thyroid issues. I can't remember exactly what she said, but it's just like, but you don't know what's going to happen like 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 2 years from now. You don't necessarily know what's happening underneath the surface when you're putting in a substance that is not native to your body. It's like, is it an enhancement or everything comes at a cost when it comes with those drugs, like antidepressants. Yeah, you can suppress your depression symptoms, but you're also gonna suppress every other feeling you have, and you're gonna end up feeling numb, and you're gonna make your brain dependent on the substance the longer you're on it, so where if you try to get off, all of your symptoms are gonna come back, not in the form of the original illness, but in the form of withdrawal symptoms because your brain has become dependent on this substance that it doesn't produce on its own, and it's learned how to function with it to where if you remove it, it's like the house of cards topples. So I feel similarly about Ozempic. I feel the same way about Botox too. I was just with two older women in their 50s. I think they're both in their 50s who were getting Botox and fillers, and my friend who I was with, and then she had her friend who's a doctor incidentally, and she had to inhale laughing gas because it was so painful what she was getting done, like tons of filler all on her face, and she was probably like getting needles poked into her, and I was watching this, and I was like, I don't want that to be me. I want to be that nice old lady, not old lady, because I think 50 is the new 40 now. 50 is
Mhm.
the new 30. Who knows? And so I'm even looking forward to it, but I did it for 6 years. I did Botox and a little bit of fillers just, like, in my cheeks, but I haven't had it in 2 years now, and I feel better about myself not doing it. Do I look at people who I know have had it done and be like, "Man," or I look at pictures of myself where my eyebrows are a little bit more lifted and, my had maybe my lips done. I had my lips done one time, which is very you can almost not even tell unless you're me, right? You can almost not even tell. Do I like the way that looks? Yeah, but I also know that the more you pump yourself full of stuff, the more taxing that is on your liver, and it's gonna make it more counterproductive for your body to process out stuff that it doesn't need, and I was doing a lot of detox at the time, I still am, and they even tell you, don't drink dandelion tea for 48 hours after you get Botox for a reason, like, your body doesn't want this stuff, it's going to try to get rid of it because it's botulism. It's an deactivated botulism and it's doing something to your body. And there's recovery groups on Facebook for people who have similar to breast implant illness, people who have had reactions to Botox that, of course, they're not talking about, and things that, because that toxin can move through the rest of your body. It's being injected into the muscle tissue, but blood goes to the muscle tissue. And so it could pick up some of that and move it to other parts of the body. And you just don't
Yeah.
know what can happen. And so who knows, maybe that's why I put on weight, because I did Botox for 6 years and I don't know.
It could
There's
also just be going off of the Adderall too, you know what I mean? Like having that prescribed and going off. But I'm wondering, my sister, ever since she started getting Botox, we laugh now because I would always say to her, she's younger than me, only by 17 months, but every time she would smile, she would raise her eyebrows and I'd say, stop raising your eyebrows, you know? And so whatever, she wanted to get Botox, she started getting Botox, she started getting her lips filled. And she's developed a crazy eye twitch. And I'm like, I think it's from your Botox. And now that she's pregnant, I want to see if, as it's wearing off, if the eye twitch stops,
Ooh,
because her doctor was kind of like, no, we don't think so. Like, of course they're saying that, but yeah, I do find it interesting. I have not gotten any Botox or filler, mostly because I'm pretty happy with my skin. But then every once in a while, I'm like, oh, I see a little bit of lines that are forming around my lips. I'm like, I guess I should probably, give up the straw, because I think that kind of does it. But yeah, I'm like, I don't want to be a hypocrite at this point. I gave up birth control, and like I not that everything is completely natural, like I use, skin care that has quote unquote, science involved, and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm in a space of awareness, just paying attention,
yeah,
and just
really
like
what it is.
small changes, and that's it.
Yeah,
So
I think that's the key, is just small changes. So I'm gonna drink, maybe focus for the next week on more water, and then the next week add 30-minute walk, then
mhm.
add going to bed 30 minutes earlier, just little tiny changes that will stack up, because that's going to make it feel effortless. It's going to make it feel fun. It's going to take all the pressure off too, because I think, and I look at the subreddit for weight loss. The one that I am looking at most is Lose It. And just people are always, it's all about losing weight. Like their whole life revolves around losing weight. And they say that that's the key. And it's like, but it's probably not as hard as we make it. If you expect something to be hard, then you're going to show up with those thoughts and feelings that are going to make the action hard. If you believe that weight loss is hard, then that's the way it's going to be for you. But if you believe that it's actually easy and you allow it to be easy, then I feel like that intention is going to allow the ideas and inspiration that you need to allow it to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to be fast, but I think that might be why people are like, oh, it's hard because I have to do it fast. Like I need to lose this weight now or yesterday,
Yeah.
And you can detach, if we can detach ourselves from it has to be now. We can detach ourselves from any particular results or outcome, and we live in the moment and we take care of ourselves in this moment. Because oftentimes overeating happens when we're not present, because we're thinking about something else, we're watching something else, we're talking. It's really hard for me to be present when I'm eating, when I'm talking to somebody else. It's like I don't pay attention to any food I'm eating when I'm in a restaurant with somebody. It's hard. Or I pay attention to the person and not the food, or I pay attention to the food and not the person. It could go both ways, but it depends on my state of mind. But I think if we detach from the outcome, and it has to be this, it has to be fast, it has to be, certain, or I'm a failure, what does it mean? What meaning are we attaching to weight loss? It's all about that awareness. So increasing our awareness on why we're doing what we're doing, how we're going to do it, and allowing it to be easy, because I feel like the best things are if it's not easy, I don't want to do it. If it doesn't flow, it doesn't feel fun to me. Like this episode that we're wrapping up here, I think it's been the best podcast episode I've ever done, ever, honestly.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah, just like flowing freely in conversation with somebody that I know, like, and trust. And what I was thinking yesterday, and I think I was going to tell you, but then I forgot because I think you had to go or something. But I grew up being that kid who wanted to be friends with a lot of people, and they were just kind of not outright rejecting me, but you could just tell they didn't like me as much as I liked them. And it's just so cool because I noticed in our friendship that we love each other the same. Like there's that
Mhm.
equality there. Like we both
Yeah.
really want to talk to each other, and that's just
Yeah.
the best. I think that's what's gonna make this show so good and so
Yeah.
helpful for all that we're willing to go there. Maybe we
Yeah.
call it go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll have to mull over it a little more. But yeah, I agree. And it's just interesting because I think both of us are so open-minded and flexible, and we're both always willing to change our minds and hear something new, and we have zero interest in forcing anybody to believe anything we believe in. We both I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of things that we have different opinions on. Like, I will be clutching you would have to pry my coffee out of my dead cold hands, and, like, that is okay, and you're not judging me for it, right? So, it's like yeah, I'm excited. I think that this will be really good and a lot of fun to continue with, and hopefully other people like it too.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, well, that's a wrap for episode 1. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and cut.